So I often get asked, what does probate mean? What does the probate process entail? And what do I need to do? Probate is the process of when somebody passes away and leaves assets. What type of assets? Sometimes they leave a homestead property, they leave rental properties, they leave bank accounts without beneficiaries, they leave retirement accounts without beneficiaries, anything that would have been in their name alone and did not have a beneficiary designation. And when people do this, then the next step is to go through the probate process with a probate attorney in your state. The probate process is when you hire an attorney to be able to file a probate action stating that somebody passed away and that there are assets that need to be distributed to the right parties. Sometimes the decedent, aka the person who's passed away, has left a last will and testament that states who receives these assets, and sometimes, when I mean sometimes, more than 50% of the United States does not leave a last will and testament, which means that the attorney has to follow intestacy statutes. That is the state law that determines who will receive these assets, and usually it's family members that receive these assets. So we start with the probate attorney, they start the probate process, and they then file an action with the state stating that someone passed away, leaving assets that need to be distributed to the right people. So the probate process entails many steps. We've talked about the probate attorney starting the action, filing the action in court, but now let's talk about the actual steps that need to take place in the court process. So when you hire a probate attorney, the first step that they do is they request for what's called a personal representative or an executor to be appointed to be able to oversee the process with the probate attorney. This is the client. This is the person that would be hiring us, and they would be the person that's in charge of making sure that all assets are found, that all debts are paid, and that the attorney is notified and informed of everything that the decedent had or would have had during life. So once a personal representative or an executor is appointed by the court, orders and letters are entered. What this means is the personal representative now has the power to check the mail, make sure that all of the bank statements are provided to the attorney, make sure that the attorney is informed of what the assets are so that the attorney can then send notice to anyone who's been sending mail that is a person that's owed money, and that they are taken care of, because we don't want creditors in the estate. And if there are creditors, we want to take care of them. Once that process has taken place and we've made sure that the creditors are taken care of, then we can start the process of selling the assets or simply liquidating assets and keeping them in a restricted account if necessary. Sometimes we can do an unrestricted account, and then holding that money to make sure that debts are paid, everyone is taken care of, like the IRS, if there are taxes that are owed. And then after all of these things are taken care of, the heirs under the will, or if there is no will, are going to be distributed the assets that are left in the estate. So the distribution process. This is the process where the personal representative ensures that the rightful heirs are receiving what they are supposed to receive in terms of their shares of the estate. This is after the claims from the creditors have been processed, meaning the personal representative and the attorney have negotiated the claims down or are paying the claims in full, and anybody else who's owed money is taken care of. After this, the heirs receive their distributions, and you get the clear to be able to close the estate. Some issues that do come up, though, during the probate process could be litigation, meaning people are fighting over what they believe to be the rightful portion of the estate that's supposed to be received by them. And if that happens, adversary proceedings could be opened during this process. And the personal representative, again, is the person who's in charge of making sure that whatever the judge decides and whatever the will, if there's a will that is there, is going to be followed. Some other issues that we see during the probate process is when we get to the bank accounts or we get to the retirement accounts and we find out that there's a beneficiary designation. This then becomes a non-probatable asset. What does that mean? It means that it's not part of the probate process. If the person who passed away left a beneficiary on an account, this does not get brought into the probate. That beneficiary receives that asset. Another issue that we see during the probate process is homestead issues. So, does the homestead property have somebody else on title? People don't usually understand what this means. What that means is when you pull title of the home, meaning who has ownership of the property, is it just the person who just passed away, or do they have a spouse or a child who's also part of title? And if there is somebody else on title, it is the probate attorney's responsibility to explain to you whether that person inherits the property 100%, 50%, 25%, whatever it states on the deed, and whether the other portion has to go into probate. What we usually see with spouses is what's called a joint tenancy with right of survivorship, which means that once the decedent passes away, then the spouse receives the property 100%. And that would mean that the property does not go into probate. Another important question that we get from clients is, what is the cost of probate? It can vary. The million-dollar answer. So it depends on multiple factors. How many creditors are there in the estate? How many heirs are there in the estate? How many consents do we need to get? How many notices do we have to send out? So it depends on multiple things, but I would say that the usual range in a probate can range anywhere between $7,500 up. And that depends on whether there's litigation as well. If it's litigated, it's going to be much higher. If it's not litigated, you're talking about the lower end. Probate does not need to be a daunting process. It doesn't need to be complicated when you have the right attorneys by your side. If you have questions regarding the probate process, feel free to give us a call today so that we can explain the process to you and explain what needs to be done in your case.